You'll get more than you expect with McValue at McDonald's. Like deals on your late night go-tos when the party goes till dawn. And savings on their faves. So date night always passes the vibe check. Plus, when the fam shows up for the weekend, you can show out for breakfast.
Buy one breakfast sandwich, add one for $1. Only in the app. Limited time only at participating McDonald's. Valid once a day. Must opt into rewards. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
Frequency Podcast Network. Stories that matter, podcasts that resonate.
Technology is changing all the time. Sometimes it's hard for humans to keep up, never mind infrastructure. And you may not think about it when you log on to your Facebook account or ask a question to ChatGPT. But something has to power these technologies, and the need for them is only expected to increase as more and more of us use artificial intelligence. Now, many tech companies rely on data centers, which use a tremendous amount of resources. In the U.S. alone, there are more than 5,000 data centers, but thankfully, someone is keeping an eye on all of it. I'm Kris McCusker, and in this episode of The Big Story, we look at what all this technology is doing to the environment and not just the energy use. There's an organization in the U.S. called the Environmental and Energy Study Institute. It's known as the EESI. And in the second of a three-part series, a report is raising concerns not only about energy use, but water use and what it could mean for some communities. The report was written by Miguel Yanez-Barnuevo, and Dan Bressette is the president at the EESI.
Environmental and Energy Study Institute, we are a climate policy nonprofit organization. We're based in Washington, D.C. We were founded more than 40 years ago. And to this day, our main work involves providing science-based, nonpartisan educational resources to members of Congress and their staff about clean energy, environmental, and climate topics. We spend a lot of time on Capitol Hill, working with members and especially their staff, both parties. We're probably best known for our congressional briefings. We do about 24 of those every year. Those are public briefings, open to anyone, in person, live cast, and they bring together experts who can help our audience understand sort of the nuances and contexts of important climate topics. But we also do a lot of writing. That's one thing we're here today to talk about is an article that Miguel worked on very hard about data centers and water usage. But we do a lot of writing. We have a podcast called The Climate Conversation. We do issue briefs and fact sheets. But really it all boils down to helping elected leaders in Washington sort of understand climate issues, clean energy issues, and environmental issues so they can do their jobs for their constituents.
Okay, so just so listeners are super clear on this, your main audience then is U.S. lawmakers, correct?
Yes, that's true. So, the U.S. Congress, the House and the Senate, those are our main, that's our main audience. There are 435 members of the House of Representatives, plus several non-voting members, and there are 100 senators. But beyond those folks are the congressional staff, and there are many hundreds more of them who work mostly behind the scenes. And in pretty much every congressional office, there's someone or maybe a couple people who are specifically assigned to be experts on climate, clean energy, and environmental topics. Sometimes that overlaps with agriculture. Sometimes it might overlap with transportation. Maybe it overlaps with tax and finance issues. But those folks have a lot of responsibility to help their bosses get smart about these topics and make good decisions. And many of them, the vast majority of congressional offices actually use our resources one way or the other. At the end of last year, 2024, which was the end of a 2-year Congress, the 118th Congress, about 83% of congressional offices were using our resources. And so that's a point of pride for us. We put a lot of effort into making sure that those resources are timely, relevant, accessible, and practical.
Okay, so again, just so I'm clear on what you're saying here, can I extrapolate from what you outlined that the reports that you put together can be used by lawmakers to affect change or to implement laws.
Yeah, they use our resources for a lot of different things. There are members who have some specialty or special expertise in climate, clean energy, and environmental issues. Oftentimes, they're assigned to committees of jurisdiction. They have maybe more specialized staff. They rely on the committee staff to help them do their work. But those folks use our resources. But there are also the rank and file, the members who maybe don't sit on committees of jurisdiction, but still have to understand these topics in order to vote or make decisions or understand the issues. Maybe that encourages them to work with other lawmakers from different parts of the country. And then also they have they have constituents back home. So, senators represent states, representatives represent congressional districts. They are constantly being asked questions or being provided with comments or ideas or feedback from their constituents back home. Sometimes those constituents are having problems, and our resources are also useful in answering that, what we would call constituent mail. When you work in a congressional office, it's a big part of the job of a lot of people in those offices, and our resources are useful for that as well.
Perfect. Okay, so with this as the overall backdrop, Miguel, please tell us about this article that you've written. This is 2 in a series of 3 on the environmental impacts of data centers, and number 2 dealing specifically with water and water consumption and how that is impacted by these data centers. So walk us through this article number 2 that you've written.
Sure. So data centers, it's one of the topics that as we talk with congressional staff, it came up a lot this year. This year, 2025, is the first year of a new congressional 2-year, and so we did a lot of meetings with congressional offices. We met with about 100 congressional offices, and the topic of data centers came about quite a bit. Congressional offices want to know more about data centers, their effects on water, on energy. They're being asked from constituents about what does it mean that data centers are coming to their congressional districts. And so with that, I thought it would be great to write an article about the impacts of data centers on water usage. And so data centers are big computational warehouses that store hundreds of thousands of chips and that are managing billions and billions and billions of data points at any given moment. All that capacity is creating energy, it's creating heat, and so to cool the chips, you need water to cool them down, or you need some kind of cooling systems to reduce the heat so that the chips can continue to do their work. This is something similar to a computer that you may have at home, where it's working, it's producing, it's creating all the it's producing all the things that you need in your computer, and it's heating up. And so you have a ventilator that is cooling the computer. Well, if you extrapolate that to a much larger system, to a much larger warehouse, as big as a Costco or a Walmart supercenter, you have hundreds of thousands of servers, and those are heating up. You need a cooling system. Most of it is water, but it can also use You can also use other kinds of cooling systems to make that keep those chips operating.
Because we do hear a lot about electricity use. Like you hear a lot about the hydro that is used by these data centers. You don't often hear about any impact to water, but the numbers are a little bit mind-blowing. This research that you've done, it suggests that this is something that people should be aware of and that something should be done. Fair?
I think it is, yes, I think it is fair to consider that there are water impacts by data centers. In the United States, a lot of the energy comes from fossil fuel power plants. About 56% of the electricity used to power data centers in the US comes from fossil fuels. In Canada, they might use more hydropower. That's great. It would be great if there was more renewable energy used by data centers in the United States. But to your point, data centers have a large water footprint, and that's calculated as the sum of three categories: on-site water usage to cool the chips, the water used by power plant facilities that supply that power to data centers, like natural gas and coal power plants, and the water consumption during the manufacturing process of processor chips. That water usage is not, it is significant. Data centers use about 1.9 liters of water per kilowatt hour. And so that can translate to millions of gallons and thousands of millions of liters of water per day. And that depends on the size of the data center. Larger data centers consume more power than smaller ones, and those that are powered by artificial intelligence can do even more. And so the question is, as there's more data centers being built and they're becoming larger campuses, they are needing more to withdraw more water from different sources, and that water can come from freshwater sources, and that is becoming a concern.
And
because
I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Finish your thought.
Because water is a limited source.
Oh, absolutely. And in some communities, maybe more than others.
Yes, water in some places can be a lot more of a finite resource than in other places. One of those might be places that often that suffer droughts, places that are very dry. I would be thinking of the Southwest United States. Areas like Phoenix have a lot of data centers, as most data centers are located next to cities, as that's where there's the demand, that's where that's where all the AI prompts are coming in from. That's where the infrastructure is located, the fiber infrastructure necessary for the data centers, and where the workforce is also located. So in those places, the water is more limited than places in Canada or places where there's where more rainy places, more that have more water availability.
It's important to note here as well that, like, you studied what is happening in the US, but I guess in theory, similar principles could be applied elsewhere. You can sort of assume that, if this is a problem in some US cities, it's likely to be a problem in other cities.
Yes, that is correct. Um, Water availability is an issue everywhere in the world. More so with climate change, as weather patterns are changing. Um, Droughts might be increasing in some places, might be decreasing in other places, and raining patterns are constantly moving in different ways. Um, One place which might be that is seeing a lot of data centers and it's having to deal with the impacts on water. For example, is Spain, where it's a very dry country and water is quite limited. But you can see that in other countries that also have um, limited amounts of water, but are trying to build data centers for economic development purposes.
So, Dan, have you raised this with some U.S. lawmakers? Um, what has the response been like? I mean, this is a report that, should be of concern to the people who make laws or allow for businesses to come in and build data centers.
Yeah, it really is. Like Miguel mentioned, at the beginning of every 2-year Congress, we do a lot of outreach and we met with many, many offices on both sides of the aisle, so Democrats and Republicans. I would say the data centers and sort of the sort of interconnection between data center proliferation as well as increased awareness of artificial intelligence, things like ChatGPT, and there are many other um, sort of use cases for artificial intelligence. That kind of collection of issues, if you will, is something that's already very much on the minds of U.S. policymakers. I would say of all of the issues that we, sort of heard about, this was probably one of the most common ones. It's also an area where the present administration is thinking a lot about these issues as well. There are many announcements happening either from the Department of Energy or from the White House that have intersections with data center proliferation or artificial intelligence. And congressional staff are trying to keep up with just like their bosses are. They're trying to keep up with the news cycles. They're trying to keep up with information. And this is already one of those issues that is gaining a lot of attention. In fact, that's why Miguel has been writing about these topics, is because there's a real thirst, pun intended, for information about these topics. It's our responsibility at EESI to, kind of look beyond the headlines, if you will. Like you were just saying, Kris, people are thinking about these data centers and they're thinking about the electricity consumption. Great. But water and energy go together. We call it the energy water nexus. Electricity is very water intensive in some, based on sort of where it comes from. But moving and treating and dealing with water is very energy intensive, and that already is putting a lot of strain on water systems. And then maybe a data center moves in and puts even more strain on that community. So, these articles like this articles like this are exactly what ESI strives to do. And in fact, this article has proven to be very, very popular and very timely. And I suspect it's because the number of resources that are pulling together information about this topic maybe aren't quite as common compared to articles or other resources that maybe just look at something like the electricity consumption. Another sort of angle to this that we've covered is recently, just a few weeks ago, in one of our, in fact, our main annual event, the Congressional Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency Expo and Policy Forum, is the intersection between energy consumption in data centers and energy efficiency. Are there ways that we can make these centers and all of the different components that Miguel described that go into these data centers? Are there ways that we can make those themselves more energy efficient to reduce demand? So I think this is one of those issues where, in a way, no one needs to be told by us that it's topical. They know that because of just following the news and listening to what people are talking about. But that's why we're there, is to kind of go that next step and help provide resources that, can help them understand, more facets of the issue, and kind of, like I said, go beyond the headlines.
I guess I ask just because there is some concern about how science and data like this might be perceived by the current administration. I feel like there's been, and maybe not with all of the politicians, but I feel like there's been maybe a change with U.S. President Donald Trump back in the White House for a second time.
Yeah, and I think, energy is definitely something that is a priority of the administration. It's a it's a collection of perspectives that I think add up to different priorities than maybe the previous administration had. Certainly as it relates to the climate impacts of energy consumption. But artificial intelligence slash data centers, and I'm using those two, I'm not using those terms interchangeably, but I am, kind of lumping them together because I think they exist together in a lot of people's minds. That is something that, sort of regardless of your outlook on sort of how the energy sector in the United States needs to be composed, or the different generation sources that need to come together to, power our economy. These are things that are having real world impacts right now. The data center proliferation that Miguel has described in his articles, data centers have been around for a while, but states and utilities and communities and the federal government are under a lot of pressure to keep up with this demand. And the energy sector in the United States has been in transition for decades. It's always in transition. There's always something sort of new coming online, again, pun intended. But the trends in data center growth are kind of unprecedented. And for a long time in the United States, measured in decades, energy consumption, or energy demand, I should say, has been relatively stable. It's been relatively flat. The U.S., uses consumes somewhere in the order of 100 quads, and that's quadrillion British thermal units of energy per year, and that's been roughly stable. But the projections that we're hearing about, and that people who are real experts in how power is generated and how the utility sector operates, and state utility planners and energy planners, they're looking at tremendous increases over the course of the next couple of years. And it takes a long time for the U.S. energy sector to, add new resources to the grid. It takes a long time for that planning to happen. There are backlogs with different components and different, generation sets. And a lot of people are really feeling kind of up against it. How do we, not just how do we keep the lights on today, but how do we keep the lights on in the future? And with all of these, data centers coming online, we aren't even talking about the water consumption issues, which are also significant. But those are very real issues to, ordinary Americans who, like it when they flip the light switch and the light goes on, and they can kind of reliably count on, safe and affordable energy. And all of those things are being put under a lot of pressure right now. And policymakers in Washington and in state capitals and in regulatory bodies and in public utility commissions are really looking at this very, very seriously, because they understand that, these data centers that are being built are going to be around for a while, and they're going to put more stress on the system. And frankly, our system's already under some stress.
Well, and that leads nicely to my next question. Like, has this tech, I mean, I know you don't want to lump artificial intelligence and data centers into, the same category, so to speak, but has tech maybe grown too fast? Infrastructure maybe not able to keep up, things like energy use or water use. Does it feel a little bit like maybe the tech is getting away from us?
I mean, I'm not a tech expert by any means. It definitely feels like um, we're moving away from kind of that, relatively stable energy demand, and into a new era where additional resources are going to have to come online much faster, at scale much greater than they've come online before. That is, I think that's the reason why so many people are paying attention to this, because our system is just simply not prepared to accommodate that. And at the same time, it's very easy to focus on the generation, right? Whether it's a fossil fuel powered power plant or whether it's solar panels, wind turbines. The generation is kind of the instinctive thing to focus on. But at the same time, we're also seeing at the federal level, at least, a lack of attention being paid toward energy efficiency. And energy efficiency is one of those reasons why our demand has been flat, because we get more bang for the buck. We get more utility out of our appliances, our equipment, our buildings. And all of these sort of things are coming together. And for people who spend their lives, becoming experts and thinking a lot about how, the U.S. economy is powered, it's making them really, they've been taking notice of this for a long time. It's just now that it's meeting, kind of the mainstream. But it's something that a lot of people, it's something that has a lot of people very concerned. And these are people who, when they're concerned, given the, reliance we have on energy and the, relative susceptibility we have to, spikes in energy affordability or spikes in energy cost, we should be taking this seriously, because it's something that's going to affect us, and it's not going to affect us for 1 year and be gone. It's going to be something that affects us for a while.
Well, and that's why organizations like yours are around, to keep an eye on these things. I know there's going to be a third report in the series, so something to watch going forward. I need to leave it there. I feel like we could probably talk about this for days, but I appreciate you taking the time to outline both this paper and some of the mandates at the EESI today. So thank you very much, both of you, for talking to me today.
Been a pleasure, Kris. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's Miguel Yanez-Barnuevo and Dan Bressette with the Environmental and Energy Study Institute. You can find more information at eesi.org. That wraps up this episode of The Big Story. You can send us feedback on this episode or any other by emailing us at hello@thebigstorypodcast.ca. I'm Kris McCusker. Thanks for listening.